Hello and welcome to the Other Kind of Doctor podcast. My name is Gemma.
And my name is Gaia, and we are both on the journey of gaining a PhD.
A quick disclaimer before we start. We are in fact the academic kind of doctors.
Well, nearly doctors.
Yes, nearly doctors. But we're not your medical kind of doctors.
So if you do need medical attention, please contact your GP.
Now, let's get on with the episode.
Hello!
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, Gemma.
I'm losing my voice a little bit, so I couldn't even do my hi, hello. Sorry.
That's probably better for everyone.
Probably for the best. What have we been up to?
Gosh, we've been to a hen do, your hen do.
We did go to my hen do, but we're not going to talk about that.
No, we're not.
It was lots of pottery painting and crochet. Apart from that, we've been marking exams.
It's like, it's never stopping.
It's never stopping, marking. To be fair, I'd prefer marking exams to coursework.
Yeah.
Because you just have to
coursework
tick. That's right.
Coursework makes me go insane.
Same.
Yeah. But yeah, we went to the hen do, and before the hen do, I brought my exams home. And during the hen do, I completely forgot they were there. Go home, and they were just there, and I couldn't believe it.
Oh, that's really sad.
Yeah. Also, I think I brought a ghost home from the hen do.
From the hen do?
Yeah, we stayed in a huge
creepy house. Massive house.
I think I brought a ghost home.
Gaia bought a ghost home in her suitcase, apparently.
Yeah.
Anyway, on with the episode. Let's not ramble. So today we're really lucky to have Arshia join us, talking about her professional practice PhD. Arshia is a trainee clinical psychologist studying at Royal Holloway, and she's currently in her final year of a doctorate in clinical psychology. It was a really interesting conversation we had with Arshia.
Was, yeah.
I learned a lot, and it sounds like that she's a busy gal for 3 years.
Yeah.
So she gives some really useful hints and tips for, I think, any kind of professional practice or like working with industry and balancing placements and all sorts like that. So
I'll use that top tip in the future.
I will use that top tip, for sure. Anyway, let's get on with the episode.
Hello!
Hi, how are you guys?
Oh, there we go. We seem to have another guest on this week. We're joined by Arshia today, who's joining us on Teams.
Yes, so we can't see her and she can't see us.
Yeah, it's all she's like in our ears. How are you doing today, Arshia?
Good, thank you. I was really looking forward to this.
Oh,
I love it when people say that. We're really happy to have you on today. So we do this with all our guests. So I wondered if you could tell us a bit about you, what your PhD is in, and what you've kind of been up to so far in your PhD journey.
Yeah. So interestingly, I'm not doing like a PhD. I'm doing the doctorate in clinical psychology, which is a professional doctorate, which means I've got a research component and I've got to work sort of clinically and change clinical placements every 6 months. And after the end of the course, I get the license to practice as a clinical psychologist. So in that regard, you still become a doctorate, but it's just sort of more a professional qualification as opposed to just research, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's a 3-year course. At least in Royal Holloway, you can't do it part-time, I don't think. So I'm in my final year. I've got to submit my thesis at the end of May, which,
Oh my
goodness. I'm not looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to that, but not looking forward to that as well.
of course.
We know the feeling.
Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. And yeah.
That's really good.
So today I want to talk about this because obviously we're doing like quote-unquote normal PhDs, and we know these professional practice PhDs exist and they're really popular in psychology, so what you're doing, but there's also some in other fields like nursing practice, education, but we don't, we know they exist, we don't actually know what they are.
Yeah.
So we thought it would be interesting for our listeners to have an idea what these are if they want to do one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's nice to actually speak to someone who knows what they're talking about, because if we were to talk about it, we wouldn't know what we're all about. So you kind of gave a bit of like an insight there into kind of what you do, but I wondered if you could go into a bit more detail about what's involved in your PhD, so kind of like how is it set out over the 3 years, like your placements, like what do they
involve? Do you have any research?
Yeah, like what research are you doing?
Yeah, it's almost like so it's the doctorate in clinical psychology. So I think everyone who does it just calls it the DClinPsy. So if I sort of slip into it, forgive me. But it's almost as if sort of, for 3 years I've been saying to my mum's fine because she's done a PhD before, so she knows the difference between a PhD and a DClin. But my dad still tells everyone I'm doing a PhD. So it's really hard, I think, for a lot of people to sort of wrap their heads around it, and it's just easier for some people to call it a PhD.
Yeah,
but
my nan thinks I'm a brain surgeon, and I'm like, I'm definitely not a brain surgeon.
Yeah, so what does it sort of comprise? So basically you start the doctorate, and then you've got so we had like a month of sort of intensive teaching just to get us started for clinical practice. And then from that point on, throughout the doctorate, it's 3 days a week of clinical placement. So you work in a clinical setting. Now this could be sort of primary, this could be secondary care, this could be kind of indirect psychological work. So I spent 1 6-month slot doing work in a consultancy, for example, doing psychological work in a consultancy, which was really cool. But basically every 6 months you change your clinical setting, and during those 6 months you work 3 days a week in the clinical setting, and 2 days a week you're either attending lectures in uni or you're working on your thesis, so your research basically. So it's very much a split, and it's almost like we're a student but we're employees at the same time. But yeah.
Researchers. It sounds like you're doing a lot.
Sounds so cool though. How do you balance all of it?
I think it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because I think the way that I conceptualize a PhD versus a DClinPsy is that a PhD is far more not to say that the research component of a DClin isn't intensive, but I think the PhD research is more intensive, so it's kind of more sort of depth, whereas I think for us on the doctorate in clinical psychology, we've just got to have more tabs in our brain open. Like we've got to have, like, I've always got my NHS email sort of open, I've got my uni email open, and then I've got obviously my personal email open. So I think like for the 3 years, you're constantly thinking, oh, is something happening on placement while I'm doing research? And then while I'm doing placement work, I'm thinking, oh my God, are my research participants going to email me back? Is everything on track with that? So, you're constantly thinking, is the other shoe going to fall at some point? And it's almost like a juggling act, if that makes sense. But yes, I think they're both slightly different and difficult in different ways, I think.
Yeah, I think for like us, we're so focused on our PhD all the time. I mean, Gaia and I have teaching as well, but we can kind of does its own. You can switch off from it. Like you can, when you're not teaching, you're not thinking about teaching.
Yeah.
But like we're so like hyper fixated on like our one area of research. But I guess when you're being taught as well, if you're in a classroom setting, that's like a completely different experience as well. You're like having to absorb all of that information as well and learn about different approaches and all sorts, I guess.
So you have actual lectures, right? Do you have like actual lectures?
Yeah, so in third year, the lectures have reduced slightly in frequency because obviously that's like a massive push for us to submit our theses.
Yeah.
But in first and second year, it was very much at least one day of the week we would have teaching, and the other day could be either teaching or research, and then the other 3 days are obviously you're working in the clinical setting. So yeah, lots of teaching, because I think, I'm not sure about the other doctorates in psychology, because I know there's a counseling doctorate in psychology as well. But for clinical psychologists, I think the idea is that after training, you should be equipped to work in any setting. You can work in the setting you like, but you should be equipped to work in, sort of almost any healthcare setting. And so there's like sort of training in just across the board, work with children, work with adults, work with older adults, just across the board, across different conditions. So obviously we need lots of teaching for that. And then every 6 months we have to work with a different population. So it's very different every 6 months, and so for that you need teaching as well. So the first 2 years definitely super teaching heavy, and then I think for the third year it comes down a little bit as we do get into sort of more research.
Oh, I wish we had some lectures.
It sounds nice. I like learning about stuff. I kind of miss sitting in a lecture or classroom setting and like learning about stuff.
I think that's quite nice actually. That's quite nice actually. So when you do 3 days a week of sort of clinical work and you're feeling like sort of like really heavy in your brain sometimes, and then you go to a lecture and you just, I mean, you don't switch off, but it's almost like your brain doesn't need to be thinking as much and it's just kind of absorbing. So actually it's quite a nice sort of balance of different activities through the week.
Yeah, it sounds really nice.
And I guess you can apply what you're learning in the classroom quite easily to what your placements are. That's what they're there for. I guess with so my PhD is looking at clinical psychology, but obviously I'm not doing it's more like intensive research focused. And my research is in like social anxiety and stuff like that. But it's sometimes when you're like deep in research, it's difficult to see how it's going to apply. Like, but I guess when you're doing your thesis or when you're doing your like learning about research in the classroom, like you can so easily see how that translates to like clinical settings and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the big differences is that our doctorate is a lot more sort of practical. Like even the things that you learn during your lectures, like the point of it is that you're gonna actually end up applying most of it through your, clinical work through the 3 years sort of thing.
That's so nice. Can you choose which placements you go to, or do they just send you to them?
Yeah, you can't see me, but I'm shaking my head.
Oh.
No, you can't choose. In third year, you do have some choice. So basically, there's sort of core competencies that you need to meet. So if this is boring, tell me to shut up.
No, go on.
No, go for it.
But basically, you need to work with older adults, you need to work with children, you need to work with sort of psychosis, you need to work in inpatient units, you need to work with learning disabilities, and there's like a few, these are just the ones that are sort of at the top of my head, but there's sort of a few other core competencies as well. Now, by the end of your second year, so for the first 2 years, you've got absolutely no choice, right? They send you based on your competencies. So in first year, it's sort of, they just send you. And then in second year, they have a look at the competencies that you achieved in your first year and what's remaining, and then they send you in your second year placements, but you still have sort of no choice, right? Because those are just competencies that you need to meet. And then in third year, if you've met all your mandatory competencies by second year, then you have choice, which is really good.
That's nice.
So it's like when you're in medical school, not that I've ever been, but my cousin has.
Yeah.
And you have to do like children, like older adults. Yeah, makes sense.
Can you? So this might be a really silly question, but can you like fail? As in, like, can you not pass a placement? Because like with research, obviously we don't have any exams, we don't have to do coursework or anything, we don't have to do any sort of formal writing until we just submit our thesis, and that's what gets examined. But I'm assuming you're being assessed on placements and stuff. Can they just be like, no, you haven't passed?
Yeah, again, you can't see me, but I'm sort of nodding my head in sadness.
Oh.
You can. I mean, I haven't failed, but I think like the fear is really real. So we've had to submit lots of coursework through the 3 years, and then you also have to submit your thesis, obviously. And I think this didn't strike my brain at all. But again, that's one of the differences, I think, is that we do have to submit coursework.
Oh.
So you do have to pass your placement. And your placement supervisor has to mark you as pass or fail by the end of your 6 months of placement. And then you also have coursework to submit. So I believe I've submitted 3 sort of case reports, 1 essay, 1 sort of stats exam that I've done, and one service related sort of practical research project based on like a clinical setting that you work in. So you have to do a practical research project that's kind of applied to their service needs. So I submitted that as well. And then I think you've got your thesis. And if you fail or if you borderline fail, you've got to submit it again while you're doing 3 days a week of clinical work anyway.
You can't see our faces, but we're shocked.
We are like, we're just looking at each other like, we are lucky. Like, I mean,
I think it's very much that, at least when I was sort of getting onto the doctorate and doing my interviews, I remember lots of people just telling me that, and I mean, I don't say this to anyone because it's not a nice thing to say, but it was very much like you're basically signing away your life for these 3 years.
Oh, that's the same for us, to be fair.
Yeah, to be fair, that does feel like it for us. Like,
at least we don't get graded in the middle of it, though.
Yeah.
But it's very much like you're kind of devoting your life to this one cause until you finish the doctorate, and then you're free. That was kind of sort of the idea that was sold to me, but we'll see by the end of it what happens.
We are still here 3 years later, so the end is in sight.
Barely, but I'm here, and hopefully I make it out in one piece. That's the goal.
The next question we have, which I guess kind of links nicely from what you've just said, is what was the application process like? And do you think that's different from like a normal PhD? Because, I mean, we kind of just...
We created a research proposal, submitted it.
Yeah, we had like made a research proposal, submitted it, found a supervisor, had an interview, and then got on.
Here we are.
And how and here you are. And how competitive would you say a PhD is? And I mean, I've got an assumption of how competitive it is. So how competitive would you say it is?
Very, but not as much.
Not as much as a DClin.
Not nearly as much.
How do you know a DClin is competitive?
We've heard stories.
We teach like undergrads, and we've just heard like how my supervisor works in the clinical department as well, and she has told me how many applicants and things like to places there are, and
sounds scary.
I think it is more competitive because they've got to find the placements for you, so they can't just accept. Like, in terms of, like, what's needed for us, we just need the funding for our research and funding for, like, our studies. But I think on top, like, so that's the only kind of limit to how many PhD students the department can take on. But I guess if you're working really closely with industry or, like, a professional practice, you need to obviously make sure they can take you on as well. And I guess that influences it.
Yeah, and so NHS England actually sponsors the number of clinical psychology places across the UK, sort of thing. And so depending on how many places they fund, courses can take people on. So actually it depends on how many people, sort of NHS England is saying unis can take, because NHS England pays for trainees. So NHS England pays the trainee sort of, stipend or salary, whatever you want to call it. And so they basically put a cap on it. So, which is why it's quite competitive. And I think just lots of other reasons. I think, sort of, actually, I'm not sure why. I've never thought about why people just want to go into clinical psychology so much after doing an undergrad in psychology. I really thought about it.
I think it's because when you're like 17, 18, that's what you think, you think that's just what psychology is. So most people are going to psychology to then do clinical. They don't know, like, other stuff exists.
Yeah, and I think that's why I said I've got no idea why this sort of competition exists, because I think for me as well, since I was 18, I just knew that this is what I wanted to be. And before I knew it was called clinical psychology, I had like a vision of this, and I was like, and then when I found out this was clinical psychology, I was like, oh, that's it, like this is my path. So for me, I just, like, in my head there was never any choice. It was just that you apply for the doctorate because this is the only way you become a clinical psychologist, and then if you get on, you get on, and if you don't get on, then you just keep trying, I guess, at least for me.
Did you get on the first time you applied?
Yes, I was very lucky. I don't know how I did it.
Clearly very talented.
No. I think I do think there's a lot of luck, I have to say. There's a lot of luck. There's a lot of, not networking, but it's who if you've worked with people who are sort of really helpful and they're qualified clinical psychologists and they're sort of really willing to kind of help you with your application, like really tell you sort of, not insider tips and tricks, but you know what I mean? Sort of like the ins and outs, and and there's sort of every sort of few years there's sort of buzzwords, and I think sometimes people have to put certain buzzwords in their application, and obviously like contextualize it. You can't just insert words. But I think there is that thing about who and how much they can tell you about what like people who are screening applications want to see in applications. And so I think it's more that sort of, as opposed to, I mean, they are choosing clinical psychologists, but it's also about like, are you saying what they want to read, as opposed to, the idealistic, am I a good clinical psychologist? I think, that's an important sort of distinction to make. And I think I had like sort of really good, really, really incredible support, and I was very lucky. And I had just done a master's actually that was almost like a copycat of the doctorate. Like it very much prepared me for the doctorate, and it was kind of structured like the doctorate as well. So in second year we had sort of clinical placements, and then we did 2 days a week of sort of teaching. And so actually I knew a lot of the things that the doctorate was teaching me already, and so I think looking back, it put me in a really good position to get onto the doctorate.
That's great.
Oh, congratulations for getting on the first time, because that's actually really hard.
I I have a look at sort of every year. Obviously, you have a look at your Twitter sort of thing, and then psychology stuff creeps in, and I look back and just sort of, you can really sort of feel the anxiety of people applying. And I always think to myself, oh my God, I think when I got on, more than the happiness of getting on, I was just happy that I didn't have to go through the application process again. Genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, I was like,
really stressful.
I was like, thank God, I never have to kill myself mentally like that ever again. But yeah.
So how did you approach your potential supervisors? Did you already know them, or did you have to go through some process?
No, so you literally don't do it like that. I mean, in terms of the application. So it's basically, there's this thing, this is how much of a horrible time of my life it was. I've literally forgotten where I applied. There's this place called the Clearinghouse. It's like a website, basically. It's a little bit like, I didn't do my undergrad in the UK, so I'm forgetting the word, but there's a place in the UK where, yes, that's it. So it's basically like UCAS. So you put your application onto Clearinghouse, and then you choose your top 4 unis or top 3 unis, I've forgotten. And then they sort of, all of them individually say if you've gotten a place with, or as in if you've been invited to an interview with them or not. And then you go for your interviews if you've been selected for an interview. And then if you get a place in more than one, then obviously you have a choice to make. But if you get in one, then, most people would choose that one. And then once you get on, for sort of half of first year, you're just sort of, having teaching and you're, doing your placement. And then from the first half of first year, you start thinking about research, roughly. I mean, obviously this varies from course to course, but roughly from the first half of first year, you start thinking about research. And then supervisors sort of come and pitch their projects and tell you what their research interests are. And then, I mean, to be honest, with Royal Holloway DClin, they kind of changed their process a little bit year by year. But with my year, I think it was more that supervisors came to us, pitched their projects, and then we had chats with supervisors and gave them kind of tentative ideas of what we wanted to do. And then our supervisors picked us, and they told us how much capacity they had. As in, are they going to take 2 students each, or whatever, say my preferred supervisor, she said to me, I think she said she had capacity for 2 people or 3 people. So I sort of knew what my chances were. And then they picked you. And then, I think you can email 2 or 3 people saying, I've chosen you and you're my first, second, or third preference. And then they come back to you saying if they've chosen you. And then if they've chosen you and you've chosen them, then it's a match. Otherwise, I think,
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's very different.
That is very different.
We just very anxiety inducing, I have to say.
Yeah. We just basically email. Well, we didn't have to do it because we already
knew our supervisors.
But people usually just contact the supervisors that they think could be in the area.
I'm learning so much today.
Yeah.
So a big part of our PhD is research training. We go to research seminars and go to specific workshops to help build our statistical knowledge or our methodology knowledge and things like that. Do you have this as well in your PhD? Does that kind of come under your teaching, or do you not have that as much? Or
so I think I keep getting emails from sort of the postgraduate research sort of department or sort of unit, and the psychology research unit, sort of inviting us to these seminars and sort of workshops and things. I think because our course is so sort of, already sort of fixed in terms of timetable and scheduling, and because there's so many things that we're constantly having to think of, I think sometimes either it sort of clashes with our sort of pre-prepared timetable, or we just don't have the bandwidth for it. I think what majority, I mean, actually, I can't speak for the majority, but I think, at least for me and my friends on the doctorate, I think what we've done is figured out with our supervisors what we want to do, figured out what the methodology is, regardless of whether we've done it before or not. And then sort of, if we've needed further training on that methodology, then you can get an external supervisor who kind of comes in as the expert on that methodology, or you can sort of get in touch with the postgraduate research sort of unit and then ask them if they're conducting workshops on that sort of methodology, and then attend the ones that you kind of mentioned. For me, sort of mine was grounded theory, and I've never done grounded theory, but I've done qual research before.
Mm.
And I think I just read up lots and lots and lots and lots about grounded theory. And my supervisor's done grounded theory before. So I think we sort of, I mean, it worked out. But I think different people have approached it differently just because of the time constraints associated with our sort of doctorate. I think we basically had 2 years to submit our thesis. That's the reality of it. Yeah.
Very nice.
So what's next after you finish? That's gonna be very soon.
Yeah. I don't know if I should say.
Oh.
Because no. It's not like some big sort of state secret or anything. It's just more that I've got a job, but I haven't gone for the job. I mean, the face-to-face ID appointments, etc. So I don't know if it's sort of premature to say anything. But yeah, I basically got a new job as a clinical psychologist from September.
Congratulations.
So I'm very excited about that. Thank you. But yeah, I think that was one of the main reasons why I wanted to do the doctorate, because I knew that if I could just get through the doctorate, that actually, at least currently, there's a lot of sort of vacancies for clinical psychologists.
Mhm.
The market's looking really good, I mean, at least for right now. And so I knew I'd be going into sort of an industry where there's more jobs than people currently to fill those jobs.
Yeah.
And so there would be more choice. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to the next few years. Where I
Oh,
can
that's
just
so fun.
That's so exciting. Can you stay?
Thank
Because
you.
obviously, some of the people that teach on your course have got DClin sites. Could you, if you wanted to, work at a university as well, like we would after we do
Yeah.
our PhDs? Is
Yeah,
that what
so
people
I
sometimes
do teach at university already, but that's
Okay.
Oh.
that's because I'm not from the UK, so I'm international,
Hmm.
which means that actually NHS England doesn't sponsor me.
Oh.
And so yeah, that's not fun. But which means that actually I only have an honorary contract with, NHS, with the NHS right now, which means that actually I can work apart, outside of the doctorate.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been teaching at Goldsmiths since 2022, which has
Okay.
been lots of fun. But yeah, so yeah, I think the answer to the question is yeah, you can, and lots of people do. And I mean, you don't even have to teach like purely in clin psych. You could, sort of teach just in psych generally. But as long as it matches with some research interest or some population interest of yours.
Oh, how
Nice.
exciting. So I wondered, if just to conclude, I wondered if you could give your top tip for someone who wants to pursue a professional practice PhD.
Yeah, I think just get lots of experience. I mean, not lots actually. Sorry, I take that back. Get relevant experience, but I think more than having, and this is what I meant about the application not necessarily assessing whether you're the best candidate, but also assessing whether you're the candidate that they want. And I think a huge part of that is sort of learning to articulate your experience, because the truth is that you could have done a lot, right? Like, I mean, so for example, if I got on in my first year and there's people who apply for like 4 or 5 or 6 years, then that obviously means that they've got far more clinical experience than I do, and perhaps deserve to get on far more than I did. But I think it's about how you sort of articulate that experience and make meaning of it, and show through that experience and the meaning you make of it that you make a good clinical psychologist. So I think it's the links you make, how you draw on your experiences, what you learn from it. And when I was applying, lots of people told me that actually, keep reflecting, like, okay, you're writing that you've done this, but so what? Like, what has happened out of this? Like, how is this meaningful for someone to read? And I think continuously asking yourself, so what, after each sentence or every couple of sentences that you write on your DClin application is really, really, really helpful. And just like for different, I think like sort of for different identities, because I remember sort of reflecting on the fact that I'm not from the UK. And in my head, I thought that actually that was quite helpful because, there's a huge population in the UK that's not from the UK.
Yeah.
So I thought that actually I could cater to their needs. And I put that on my application, but I hadn't explicitly made that link of what is it that I bring to the table by not being from the UK. And so when someone read my application, they were like, okay, but why is this important for someone to know? Like, what does this do to the world of clinical psychology? And so I think constantly asking yourself that, almost sort of very critically, is sort of really, really helpful.
That's such a good tip.
That is such a good tip.
Thank you. Yeah, I truly do think it saved me, that one tip of sort of constantly asking myself, okay, but like, what's the takeaway from this?
Oh, that's so helpful. Thank you so much for coming on today. Just to conclude, if people want to find you online, do you have Twitter or X or anything that people can follow you or not?
Yes. So my X is Arshia C. And my LinkedIn, I believe, is just Arshia Choudhury.
Great.
Fantastic. Oh, thanks so much for coming on, Arshia.
It was amazing. Thank
It was
you.
amazing and really helpful. And I'm sure
Thank
lots
you
of
so much
listeners
for having me. This was so much fun.
Ah, thank you. Brain bites.
Oh, you managed
I
it.
did. I love that.
Nice.
Got to keep going with the brain bites. Anyway, what are we talking about this week, Gaia?
BookTok.
BookTok.
Love BookTok.
We love BookTok. Okay, we probably need to explain to people what BookTok is.
Yes.
So, BookTok is like a subsection of TikTok.
Where people talk about books.
Where people talk about books and reading, specifically like reading as an adult and kind of getting back into reading as an adult. I think for me, I hadn't picked up a book in years. And then I found BookTok. And then I read loads now.
Yeah, I found my favorite series from BookTok. It was A Court of Thorn and Roses.
Have you read it?
Yeah.
I've got the first of that one. I haven't read all of it.
It's so good.
Is it?
Yeah,
I've
you need to read it.
I've got the first one on my bookshelf, but I haven't picked it up yet.
So good.
So we looked at seeing if other people also found that BookTok helped them getting back into reading as an adult. And in a survey conducted, I think by TikTok, found that people reported an increase in their reading activity due to like exposure on BookTok, which I think is just really nice because I think social media has such a bad rep when it comes to like people being online and things like that. But people like kind of use it as like an online book club and like there's like a whole like reading community and things
if
like
you
that.
use it well, it can have beneficial effects.
Yeah, exactly. And this survey found that 48% of TikTok users read more books now than they did before they used TikTok.
I definitely relate to that.
Same. Me too.
Also because even if I'm in a reading slump and then I see TikToks of people being like really excited to read, I'm like, I need to read something right now.
Or people that have like really aesthetic reading.
Ooh.
Where they're like, make all of their room look nice.
Which is definitely not what my room looks like.
Yeah, no.
But I can pretend.
Yeah, pretend. And you can also like discover like new writers as well. Because I know for me, I'm like, I know that I like this person's style of writing. I'll just like pick up another one of their books. But I found some of my favourite books from TikTok. So love that.
Yeah.
Not really research today, but
no,
kind of a survey, so kind of like market research. But good vibes.
Reading stuff is always good.
It's always good. It's good for you. It's good for you. And it makes a difference to reading journal articles.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
No one's kissing in journal articles ever.
There are other books, Gaia, as well. I like a murder mystery, but
well, sometimes people are dead in journal articles. That's fine.
A murder mystery. Well, you were in forensic psychology.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I meant. They're probably
mystery.
not dead in your journal articles.
Definitely not in my journal articles. Anyway, we are off topic again, of course. That's it for today, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening.
Find us on social media at otherdoctor_pod.
Yeah, we've got all like news and vacancies and website transcriptions on our website, www.theotherkinddoctor.wordpress.com. Thanks so much to our lovely podcast team, as always, for sorting us out, sorting our mental crazy lives out for us, and to lovely Arshia for being our guest today, and to the Royal Holloway Doctoral School for supporting this podcast.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, guys. See you next week.
Bye.